It was one of those perfect Saturdays. Bright, breezy, and just warm enough to make yard work feel rewarding instead of punishing. I'd just had my morning coffee and was ready to tackle the overgrown patch of grass that had been bothering me all week. You know the kind. It wasn't terrible, but it definitely needed attention. I figured I'd knock it out around noon when the sun was high enough to dry the grass, but not too hot to turn the whole thing into a sweat-soaked nightmare. So there, I was, just a regular guy mowing his front yard, headphones in, not bothering a soul. I had my noise-canceling earmuffs on, music playing, and I was halfway done when I saw her. Karen. Every neighborhood's got one. Ours? She's the self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, complete with a clipboard, permanently pursed lips, and an uncanny ability to appear the moment someone violates even the spirit of the HOA rulebook. She doesn't hold any official position on the HOA board, not that it matters. She might as well be the president with how seriously she takes her role as neighborhood enforcer. At first, I didn't hear her. I was pushing my mower along the edge of the driveway when I noticed her standing at the edge of my lawn, arms crossed, tapping her foot like I'd just run over her roses. I pulled off my earmuffs and gave her a polite nod. Afternoon. I said. It's noon, she snapped. I blinked. Yeah. That's usually what comes after 11. She didn't laugh. Of course not. Karen stepped onto my lawn, mind you, and pointed at the mower like it was some kind of war crime. You're disturbing the peace. People are trying to enjoy their lunch and all they can hear is that thing. I looked at my mower, then back at her. Karen, it's a lawnmower. It's the weekend. I'm allowed to mow my lawn. Not during quiet hours. Quiet hours? I repeated, eyebrows raised. Since when is noon considered quiet hours? She pulled out her phone like she was about to show me a government mandate. It's a community guideline. No outdoor noise between 12 p.m. and 2 p.m. It's in the HOA newsletter. I'd read that newsletter, front to back, mostly because the HOA once fined me for leaving my trash bin out past 9 a.m. the day after pickup. And ever since, I've been extra careful. There was no such rule. I knew it. She knew it. But she was standing there, glaring at me like I'd just insulted her dog. Well, I didn't see that rule, I said calmly, trying not to escalate. Karen huffed and spun on her heel. You'll be getting a notice, she called over her shoulder. I stood there, confused, and honestly a little amused. She couldn't be serious. Mowing the lawn at noon? That's just life in suburbia. I put my earmuffs back on and finished the job. No one else in the neighborhood seemed to care. In fact, a couple of my neighbors waved or gave me the nod of solidarity. You know, the unspoken language of homeowners who've dealt with the Karen species before. But true to her word, the next day I got a notice in the mail from the HOA. A $75 fine. Violation. Excessive noise during restricted hours, 12 p.m. 2 p.m. on a Saturday. I actually laughed when I opened it. This has to be a joke, I thought. But the letter looked official. It had the HOA's letterhead, a citation number, and even a spot for me to pay or dispute within 14 days. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like being fined for something that doesn't exist. So I checked the HOA's rulebook, again, online, printed copy, everything. There was nothing about quiet hours from noon to 2. Not on weekdays, not on weekends, not ever. I knew then that Karen had something to do with this directly. But what really got me? She was acting smug the next time I saw her. I was walking my dog the following morning, and she was in her garden, pruning a rosebush like she hadn't just falsely accused me of violating a rule. She saw me and smiled, a full-teeth, smug, condescending smile. Hope you got my message, she said, not even trying to be subtle. Sure did, I replied. Thanks for the heads up. That's when I decided. If she was going to play games, I was going to play smart. You see, I'd recently upgraded my doorbell camera. The thing records audio, video, motion, pretty much everything. It stores 2 weeks' worth of footage, and best of all, it catches everything happening right in front of my lawn. So when Karen was standing there yelling at me, clipboard in hand, yeah, my camera caught all of it. Her voice, her threats, the total lack of any real noise ordinance violation. She even said, clear as day, I'll make sure the board hits you with a fine. Boom. Evidence. And just like that, what started as a normal Saturday had turned into a mission. I wasn't just going to pay some bogus fine and move on. Nope. If Karen wanted to start something, she had no idea I'd already hit record. The fine really wasn't about the money. $75 wouldn't break the bank. But it was the principle that got under my skin. I wasn't about to sit back and let Karen rewrite the rules of our neighborhood because she didn't like the sound of a lawnmower at noon. Still, I didn't react right away. I needed to be strategic. I spent that evening reviewing the footage from my doorbell camera. The video was perfect. Crisp image, clear sound. You could hear every word she said. She even admitted she didn't know if it was a rule, but that people need to be taught a lesson about disturbing the neighborhood. Her exact words. Oh, and she flat out said, "Don't worry, I already spoke to Craig on the board. He'll make sure it gets processed." Craig, the HOA board president. Suddenly everything clicked into place. That smug smile she gave me while gardening. Yeah. It wasn't just arrogance. It was confidence. Confidence that her word was law. Around here. Confidence that she could manipulate people behind the scenes and no one would ever push back. Except now she'd messed with the wrong neighbor. So the next morning, I called the HOA office. Not Craig. He wasn't about to give me a fair shake. I asked to speak with Susan, the community manager. Susan was newish, maybe been with us for a year, and she still seemed like the type who cared about keeping things legit. "Hi, Susan. This is Daniel from Lot 34, I said politely. "I received a fine yesterday for excessive noise on Saturday. At noon. I believe it's an error." "Oh?" she said, sounding surprised. "Let me pull up the file." A few seconds passed as she clicked through her system. "Yes, here it is. Violation submitted by Karen Reynolds. It says you were mowing during quiet hours. Can you point me to where in the bylaws or handbook it says noon is considered a quiet hour?" Another pause. Let me double check." Minute later, she came back on the line. "You're right. There's no such rule listed here." "Right," I said. "And I have video proof of Karen threatening me and admitting she pushed the fine through by talking to Craig." There was a long silence after that. See?" Susan finally said. "Would you be willing to forward me that footage for documentation?" "I already did," I said. "Check your inbox." A few more seconds of silence, then she said, "I've got it. Reviewing now." I waited. Oh wow. Yeah, okay. This is not how we're supposed to handle violations. This should have been formally reviewed by the board, not pushed through because someone had a personal issue. I could almost hear the discomfort in her voice. She wasn't expecting to see a whole suburban drama unfold in crystal clear 1080p. Stayed calm and polite. "I'd like the fine formally dismissed, and I want written confirmation that it's been cleared from my file." "Absolutely," she said quickly. "I'll take care of it today." That should have been the end of it. Case closed, right? Not with Karen. That same afternoon, she was back. Only this time she didn't storm onto my lawn. She stood across the street, arms crossed, just watching. I'd gone out to grab the mail, and she locked eyes with me like she was trying to melt. Me with her glare. "You think you're clever," she called out. I stared back, expression neutral. "I know I am." "You really think Craig's going to take your side after this?" she snapped. "Pretty sure the HOA isn't supposed to be a personal playground," I replied. "You might want to brush up on the bylaws. I hear those are a thing." She scoffed, turned on her heel, and marched back to her house. Now I was angry. It was one thing to get caught doing something wrong and face consequences. But this was deliberate harassment. She was abusing the HOA system to settle some made-up personal grudge, and Craig, the board president, was enabling it. So I made another call. This time, I contacted a neighbor of mine, Jill, who used to serve on the HOA board before she stepped down last year. She left after getting fed up with the drama, but she still knew the system inside and out. I told her everything. The fine, the video, Karen's behavior, Craig's involvement. "Oh my God," she said. "Karen's been pulling this crap for years, but no one's ever caught her red-handed like this." I could almost hear her getting excited. "You've got video of her admitting to pushing a fake fine?" "Yep," I said. "Want a copy?" "Absolutely." And just like that, the gears started turning. Jill forwarded the footage to two other former board members, people who still had influence in the neighborhood, even if they weren't official anymore. By that evening, the video was making the rounds in the local Facebook group. It was shared in group chats, whispered about during dog walks, and even brought up during a pickleball match in the community park. Everyone was talking. And Karen? She had no idea. The next morning, she was back in full Karen mode, trimming her hedges like nothing was happening. She still thought she had control. That wouldn't last long. By the time the HOA office opened the following Monday, there were already 6 complaints filed against Karen, all from neighbors, citing harassment, abuse of HOA procedures, and inappropriate behavior. A few even attached the video I'd taken. I didn't have to organize anything. I didn't even ask anyone to step in. The video did all the talking, and the board? Well, they couldn't ignore it anymore. Even Craig, as much as he tried to brush it off, was now under fire for approving a fine without documentation or a hearing. It was a clear violation of the HOA's own procedures. And now he was being investigated by the Oversight Committee. All because Karen couldn't handle a lawnmower. At noon, even before the fine showed up in my mailbox, I had a feeling something was off. Karen wasn't just mad that I was mowing at noon. She wanted something to come of it. There was a certain energy in the way she said, "You'll be getting a notice." It wasn't just frustration. It was satisfaction. Like she already knew she'd won. That's when the dots started connecting in my head. Craig, the HOA president, and Karen had always been suspiciously close. Not in a romantic way, don't worry. I'm not here to write a soap opera. But they definitely had some behind-the-scenes arrangement going on. Anytime Karen had a complaint, it magically turned into action, while everyone else had to jump through hoops just to get a noise complaint filed. So when I got hit with that $75 fine, my first instinct wasn't to panic. It was to verify. And thank God for that doorbell cam. I had it installed about 6 months ago, mostly to keep an eye on packages and to catch any stray raccoons knocking over the trash bins. But it had already proven its worth once when it caught the neighbor's teen backing into my mailbox. So I figured, hey, it might have picked up something this time too. Boy, did it ever. I sat down that night with a cup of coffee and pulled up the footage from Saturday, fast-forwarding to around noon. I watched myself pushing the mower, earbuds in, minding my own business. The grass was a little tall, but the mower wasn't excessively loud. Certainly not more than any other yard tool you'd hear on a typical weekend. Then came Karen. The camera caught her marching down her driveway and across the street like she was leading a military parade. The moment she stepped onto my lawn, the microphone picked up her voice. "It's noon. That's quiet hour. You're disturbing the peace." Voice came through a second later. "Karen, it's a lawnmower. It's the weekend. I'm allowed to mow my lawn." Then came the bombshell. "I don't care. I already talked to Craig. You'll get a fine. We're sick of people like you making this neighborhood loud and trashy." Trashy? Oh, she did not just say that. I rewound and played that section again, just to make sure I heard her right. Yup. Clear as day. Not only was she threatening me with a fine before any official process took place, but she also openly admitted that she'd already coordinated with the HOA president. That's not enforcement. That's a setup. And the way she said, "people like you." Yeah, I took that personally. So I pulled the footage, trimmed the clip, and emailed it to myself. I even made a second copy just in case anything mysteriously disappeared. I didn't know how deep Karen's influence really went, but I wasn't going to take any chances. The next morning, before calling Susan at the HOA office, I decided to check the rest of the footage, specifically what happened after our little lawn confrontation. Sure enough, about 15 minutes later, the camera caught something else. Karen walking up the sidewalk with Craig. She must have called him right after leaving my lawn, because there he was, polo shirt tucked in like he thought he was the CEO of the neighborhood. They stood across the street from my house, talking in low voices, but the cameras, Mike picked up just enough to hear bits and pieces. Karen. He's always pushing the rules. It sets a bad example. Craig. We'll just call it a noise violation. There's wiggle room. Karen. Good. I want it processed today. Processed today. Not reviewed, not discussed, processed. Like I was a number on a spreadsheet. That's when I felt my stomach turn. This wasn't about noise. It wasn't about quiet hours. This was personal. Karen had it out for me, and Craig was letting her pull the strings. The rest of the day, I went over and over the footage. I couldn't decide what stunned me more: how blatantly corrupt they were, or how confident they seemed that no one would ever call them out. They must have done this before. Probably to other neighbors who just didn't fight back. But now they'd picked the wrong person. I wasn't just going to dispute this fine. I was going to shine a floodlight on their little backdoor operation, and that started with making sure others saw what I saw. I called up Jill, the former board member who I mentioned earlier. She was sharp, level-headed, and didn't play favorites. If anyone could recognize just how serious this was, it was her. I sent her the footage, both clips, the one of Karen threatening me, and the one where she and Craig whispered about wiggle room. She called me less than an hour later, and she was livid. "Daniel, this is bad," she said. "This isn't just unethical. If someone wanted to push it far enough, this could be grounds for legal action." I wasn't even surprised. I figured as much. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't crazy. "Oh, you're not crazy," she said. "You're just the first person who finally caught them in the act." And once she had the footage, she did what I hoped she'd do. She sent it to her network. Other former board members, longtime residents, even a couple of folks who'd had similar issues with Karen and Craig in the past. Within 24 hours, the video was making the rounds. People started talking, sharing stories. One neighbor said he got fined for having excessive yard decorations, when all he had was a string of solar lights and a gnome. Another said Karen complained about their kids laughing too loud while playing in the backyard. All these complaints? Guess who submitted them? And guess who approved them? Karen. And Craig. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. And now, thanks to that doorbell cam, the pattern had evidence. Cold, hard, time-stamped evidence. I'd gone from being annoyed about a bogus fine to sitting on the smoking gun that could blow the whole HOA power structure wide open. And something told me Karen had no idea what was coming next. If you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you know it's supposed to function like a mini-government. Rules, votes, checks, and balances. But ours? It was more like a dictatorship. And surprise, surprise. Karen was the unofficial queen. The more I dug, the more it became clear that this lawnmower fine wasn't some isolated incident. It was just the latest in a long string of power moves. Petty, targeted, and always shielded behind vague community guidelines. I started talking to more neighbors. I wasn't on some mission to build a rebellion or anything. I just wanted to know, had this happened to anyone else? Spoiler, it had. Mark, 2 doors down, told me Karen filed a noise complaint against him last year for working out in his garage with the door open. At 7 p.m., barely dusk. He played music on a Bluetooth speaker, nothing crazy, but somehow got fined for creating a public nuisance. Guess who signed off on it? Craig. Then there was Susan from across the cul-de-sac. She got cited for having unauthorized landscaping modifications. Her crime? Swapping out her mulch for river rock? Karen actually took photos of her yard from behind her fence, emailed them to the board, and, shocker, it turned into a formal warning. And Jill, the former board member, she admitted she'd tried raising concerns about Craig and Karen's little alliance over a year ago. They gaslighted me, she told me. Said I was making drama and trying to stir up division. So I quit. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me anymore. Karen and Craig had turned the HOA into their personal fiefdom, issuing fines and warnings like parking tickets, except the only people who ever got them were the ones Karen didn't like. This wasn't just unfair, it was abuse, so I decided to hit them where it hurt. I requested an official meeting with the HOA board. Under our community charter, any homeowner can present evidence and contest a violation in front of the full board, as long as they give 5 days' notice. I made sure my email was formal, factual, and CC'd to Susan, the community manager, just in case Craig lost it. While waiting for the meeting date, I kept gathering receipts. I compiled video clips, neighbor testimonials, screenshots of text messages and emails. I even found an old thread in the neighborhood Facebook group where Karen bragged about finally getting rid of those tacky gnomes someone had in their yard. She didn't name names, but my neighbor Mark sure recognized his gnome family. When the day of the board meeting arrived, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. It was held in the small community center next to the clubhouse. Rows of metal chairs, a folding table up front, and a small crowd that clearly wasn't there just for the free bottled water. Word had spread. People wanted to see what would happen. The board members sat at the front, Craig in the middle, trying to look important in his beige blazer. Karen, of course, sat in the front row with that familiar smug expression, arms crossed, like she was already bored of whatever I had to say. Big mistake. I opened with a calm introduction, then played the first video, the one where Karen stormed onto my lawn and said, "I already talked to Craig." I could hear a few gasps behind me, but it got better. Next, I played the footage of Karen and Craig talking across the street, whispering about wiggle room and processing the fine. Today, it was all crystal clear. And for good measure, I printed transcripts and passed them to the board members not in Craig's back pocket. Then I dropped the stack of other complaints, photocopies of fines, warning letters, and messages from neighbors who'd had similar experiences, and I ended with a simple question. How many of these so-called violations were actually voted on by the full board? Or were they all fast-tracked through Craig because Karen said so? Dead silence. Craig tried to clear his throat and mutter something about informal approvals, but Susan, the community manager, spoke up. "Daniel's right. These actions don't follow our due process procedures, and I'm deeply concerned that several fines were issued without documentation, hearings, or full board votes." Karen turned red. Not the embarrassed kind. Angry red. She stood up, sputtering. "This is ridiculous. He's twisting everything. That footage is taken out of context." I turned to face her. "Context? You said, 'I already talked to Craig. You'll be fined.' What context makes that okay?" She opened her mouth, then closed it. People in the room were whispering now, some shaking their heads, some actually laughing. It was over. The board voted that night to rescind my fine, unanimously, with Craig abstaining. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 other board members submitted formal ethics complaints against Craig, citing collusion and abuse of power. Karen, while not officially part of the board, was banned from submitting complaints without photographic evidence and a witness moving forward, a rule that was quickly dubbed the Karen Clause. The next day, I walked outside around noon, mower in hand, and started cutting my grass with the biggest smile on my face. Karen peeked through her blinds, but she didn't come outside. That silence? Oh, it was beautiful. After that board meeting, the neighborhood didn't just go quiet. It shifted. It was like everyone realized all at once that the little empire Karen and Craig had been building wasn't unshakable after all. All it took was one person pushing back with proof. One person saying, "No more." And suddenly, the spell broke. The very next weekend, I saw something that nearly made me laugh out loud. 3 neighbors mowing their lawns at noon, on purpose. Lawnmower engines buzzed up and down the street like a peaceful protest. Mark even waved to me while mowing in a tank top and blasting Bon Jovi from a speaker. Karen didn't dare step outside. She just glared from behind her curtains like the Scooby-Doo villain who finally got unmasked. But I wasn't done. Because while the board had removed my fine and agreed Craig's behavior was questionable, they hadn't taken any real disciplinary action yet. And let's be honest, guys like Craig don't change unless you force them to. So I filed a formal petition to recall him as HOA president. Now let me be clear, this wasn't easy. Our HOA bylaws require 30% of homeowners to sign the petition, just to trigger a recall vote. That meant I needed around 60 signatures. But after that meeting and the footage that had made the rounds online, people were ready. Some signed the moment I asked. Others needed to hear the story for themselves, so I told it, again and again. I showed them the clips on my phone, gave them copies of the documents, even walked around with a little binder, labeled HOA Truth File. The funny part? Half the people who signed didn't even know Craig, they just knew Karen, and that was enough. By the end of the week, I had 73 signatures. We submitted the petition officially, and the board had no choice but to schedule a community vote. That's when the scrambling really started. Craig suddenly began reaching out to neighbors he hadn't spoken to in years, offering help, with minor repairs, asking for feedback, pretending to be the good guy. Karen even posted a tone-deaf essay in the neighborhood Facebook group titled, "Why Rules Matter," trying to frame me as the real threat to peace. That post backfired hilariously. Every comment under it was either roasting her, fact-checking her, or quoting her from the doorbell footage. Jill, the ex-board member, even commented, "If the rules mattered, maybe you should have followed them too, Karen." When the day of the recall vote arrived, the room was packed. People brought lawn chairs, snacks, even folding fans. It felt less like a formal meeting and more like a showdown. HOA drama turned community theater. And everyone wanted a front row seat. The board called the vote, and one by one, residents stepped up to cast their ballots. When the results were announced, the room held its breath. Craig was removed. Over 80% voted yes. He didn't even stay to argue, just got up, muttered something about ungrateful residents, and walked out with Karen trailing behind him, mumbling about how the neighborhood was going downhill. And just like that, the regime collapsed. What followed was kind of beautiful. The board held a special election for a new president, and Jill won by a landslide. She immediately introduced reforms, transparency on complaint filings, proper vote logs for violations, and a new clause that prevented any single board member from acting unilaterally. But the best part? Karen lost her self-declared power. She could still submit complaints, but now she had to follow the same rules as everyone else. No fast-tracking, no whispering to her buddy on the board. Just fill out the form, attach proof, and wait for a vote. She hated it. One afternoon, a couple weeks later, she tried flagging me down while I was walking my dog. "Daniel, we need to talk." I kept walking. I said we should talk. I paused, turned slightly and said, "Karen, if you have an issue, file a complaint, like everyone else now." She stood there frozen, jaw slightly open, not used to people telling her no. It felt good. But here's the thing. This whole situation showed me something I hadn't expected. How fragile these power structures really are. Craig and Karen built their kingdom on fear, silence, and technicalities. But the moment someone documented it, the whole thing crumbled. And I wasn't just satisfied with my lawnmower victory. I realized this kind of abuse probably happens in tons of HOAs across the country, so I decided to do something about it. I created a blog, HOA Truth Watch. I started posting my footage, breakdowns of how to challenge violations, interviews with former board members, and tips on how to read your community's bylaws. Nothing flashy, just facts, just empowerment. And wouldn't you know it, people started sharing their own stories. One woman in Arizona said she got fined for drying her towels on a balcony. A guy in Texas shared how his HOA banned truck owners from parking in driveways. And all of them felt helpless until someone finally said, "Here's how to push back." So yeah, this started with a stupid $75 fine. But it ended with a new board, a reformed HOA, a neighborhood that actually feels like a community, and a movement that's slowly helping other folks say, enough. And as for my lawn, I mow it proudly. Every Saturday, noon sharp. And if anyone's got a problem, well, I've got the footage.